Thank you for that introduction, Shangri-La. I really appreciate it. Like Shangri-La mentioned, my name is Ingrid Zaragoza. I'm here to present my research. Sorry, I'm really sick, so I sound a little froggy today. But my research is on language and pesticides, challenges faced by Spanish speakers in the Washington agricultural industry. Go. So just a little bit of background for those who are not familiar with agriculture here in Washington State or in the country. Pesticides are largely relied upon tool. Over 1.5 million people are agricultural workers in the United States. This means that over 1.5 million people work with or around pesticides every day. And of course, this is a little bit of outdated data, so that number could have increased by now. In the state of Washington, we do have requirements for pesticide licensing. So this means that depending on the kind of work you're doing, a pesticide license may be required and an examination may be required in order to make certain kinds of applications. So for example, if you're applying a restricted use pesticide, which is what is labeled by the EPA at the federal level or the state level, if you're distributing pesticides or provide advice on their use, aside from home and garden pesticides, if you're applying pesticides for a commercial service, or if you're a public employee applying pesticides through powered equipment, you must take an examination with the state of Washington and attain your pesticide license. With over 28,000 licensed pesticide applicators in Washington state alone, proper safety and handling is crucial to ensure that no mishaps happen. So just a bit of an overview with my goals with this study. I'm hoping that the study will contribute to the literature on pesticide safety and handling. My intention with the study is for state agencies and stakeholders to improve resources for pesticide applicators, both English speaking and Spanish speaking. And as of a few weeks ago, Washington State has exactly 28,599 pesticide licensees in the state of Washington. So this does not mean that only 28,599 people are making pesticide applications daily. These are the ones who hold a license because you're still able to make applications under supervision. But out of those 28,599 people, 11.5% of them indicated that they spoke Spanish. Now, it's important to note that this does not take into account people who speak Spanish, but were unable to take an exam in Spanish, as not all exams that the state offers are translated into Spanish. So some people who do not speak English, or maybe it's not their preferred language, have to take an exam in English because that's the only thing available to them. So here are my research questions. So my first research question is, how do Spanish and English-speaking pesticide licensees differ in their perceived environmental protection knowledge, hazard awareness, and overall confidence in pesticide handling? And my follow-up question to that is, to what extent does perceived competency and confidence level using pesticides correlate with the type and classification of a pesticide applicator's license? Now, why does this matter? Here on the right-hand side, we have a pesticide label. I'm not sure if anyone here feels super comfortable. Like if I just threw this at you and I said, all right, have fun, go make applications. I think it's a bit intimidating, right? It looks very daunting. The font is extremely small. As we can see here, only a few sections are translated to Spanish. This is a very popular herbicide, paraquat dichloride. And so this is commonly used by a lot of pesticide handlers. And so I think this lack of Spanish pesticide resources like pesticide labels and educational content leads to insecurities. And that's my intentions of proving that with my study. So my hypothesis is that Spanish-speaking pesticide licensees feel lower levels of confidence when it comes to pesticide handling in comparison to English-speaking pesticide licensees. And my hypothesis for the follow-up question is that there is a difference in confidence levels between these types, license types, and the language spoken. So just to go over my methods, as Shangri-La mentioned, I am the bilingual licensing and recertification specialist with the Department of Agriculture. In my role, I am invited to different events to talk about laws and rule changes. So here I am pictured doing my thing. And so during these events, I asked the corporations or the stakeholders who were hosting these events if I could survey there. And so originally, I had created Microsoft Form surveys, but due to these events taking place in highly agricultural areas like Yakima, Wenatchee, sometimes I think when we went to Linwood, which I know is like more less rural, but I was worried about cell phone reception, and also not everyone has a cell phone. And so I didn't want to rely on people having a cell phone or access to one to take my survey. So I ended up making paper surveys and inputting them into Microsoft Forms once I collected the data. So I had 193 Spanish-speaking pesticide licensees participate in my survey, and 98 English-speaking pesticide licensees participate in my survey. I did a mix of convenience sampling and purposive sampling. Um, and so in my surveys, I measured a few different things. I looked at demographics, which I'll show in a few slides, where I asked for age and educational levels. I asked for their comfort levels interpreting a pesticide label, their comfort levels with hazards, their comfort levels with environmental protection, and supervising applications by non-certified applicators. On the survey, I also asked people if they could please provide contact information so that I may conduct some follow-up interviews with them. And I had a number of volunteers. So I conducted 4 interviews with Spanish-speaking pesticide licensees. Additionally, I won't be mentioning this unless there's time anymore in my slides, but I did analyze exam scores as well. People provided their license numbers, and I looked up their exam scores to analyze and compare exam scores and a number of attempts between English speakers and Spanish speakers. And the Department of Agriculture also provided me with some data to analyze as well. So I just want to highlight some demographics here. Oops, there were supposed to be some boxes there. Well, we're going to pretend. So we'll pretend there's a red box around educational levels. So on the left-hand side, we have Spanish speakers. And I just want to highlight that 23% of my survey correspondents had less than a high school education, whereas for English speakers, only 2% of them had less than a high school education. And if we look at some college or completed college or more, 77% of English speakers have some college or completed a college education, whereas only 26% of Spanish speakers had some college education. I would also like to highlight the section of comfort levels reading, speaking, and writing in English. As we can see here on the Spanish section, the majority of them felt neither comfortable or uncomfortable, very uncomfortable or uncomfortable, whereas for the English speakers, as expected, they felt mostly very comfortable with English speaking. And lastly, I'd like to highlight the average time working in the industry prior to being licensed. So Spanish speakers have an average time of 6.3 years. My survey question was worded something along the lines of, how long have you worked with or around pesticides? And so it was 6.3 years for Spanish speakers, but almost double, 10.2 years for English speakers. So, like I mentioned, I did a mix of open-ended and Likert scale results. So for my Likert scale questions, I asked their comfort levels interpreting a pesticide label, and they can pick between very comfortable, uncomfortable, and so on and so forth. And so I found it was statistically significant difference interpreting a pesticide label, just generally using restricted use pesticides and supervising applications. So this means that English speakers felt significantly more comfortable making restricted use pesticides applications, interpreting a pesticide label, and supervising applications in comparison to their Spanish-speaking counterparts. I did find that there was no statistically significant difference when it came to comfort levels preventing environmental hazards and comfort levels protecting the environment. So things like pollinators and groundwater, there was no statistically significant difference. And when looking at license types and language spoken, there was no statistically significant difference among license types. So it seems like regardless of the license type that you hold, your confidence levels stayed the same. So for example, here we have a commercial operator and a private applicator. If we compared languages, there was no difference. And I'll go through in my discussion section as to why I think that is. So just like I mentioned, I did have conducted some interviews. So this interviewee, I asked them why they felt insecure interpreting a pesticide label based on survey results. And they said, and this is translated, I translated it myself from Spanish. They said, More than anything, because it's in English. But then again, nowadays, with all the technology and everything, I can just use my phone to take a picture and put it into a translator, which makes it much easier for me. Still, it is one of the things I find a little bit difficult. And then I did ask at the end, how could resources be improved? What can the Department of Agriculture do for you? In this interview, he said, could you offer more training sessions in Spanish? Because as you know, the vast majority of them are currently conducted in English. And I was curious as to why environmental protections scored so highly and why there wasn't a significant difference. In this interview, he says, oh, yeah, we are very careful with the bees. We have a lot of bees, and we always take care to ensure we don't make any errors. And we like to take care of everything. This last one's a little long, so bear with me. But when asked why they felt insecure supervising applicators and based on their survey responses, this interviewee says, well, a little bit, sometimes I feel a little bit insecure because you try to ensure that everything runs by the book. But then there are times with people, the folks who see you where you tell them you have to use this or you have to use that, and you watch them. And sometimes they take it off or they're wearing gloves that aren't actually suitable. You really try to do things the right way, right? But sometimes you just can't be constantly hovering over people. Yeah, that's probably when I do feel a little bit, well, sometimes, how should I put it? Worried sometimes because I tell myself that I'm trying to do my job properly, but there are people who are just there to collect a paycheck. And well, they either don't care about the regulations or they simply don't know what the regulations. So, to dive into the discussion, Spanish speakers feel more insecure interpreting a label. I think we can all come to the conclusion that this is because the labels are in English and they're extremely intimidating. I don't believe they're written at a reading level below the eighth grade. As we can see, a big majority of Spanish speaking correspondents had less than a high school education. So this can impact their comfort levels interpreting a pesticide label. I think this is another reason why they felt more insecure overall using restricted use pesticides. And the lack of confidence supervising non-certified applicators could be due to lack of training for non-certified applicators, and lack of resources available to them in English and in Spanish. I think there was no significant difference between language spoken and license type because, again, they all have access to the same resources. So this means they're taking in the same level, quantity of education and the same topics. So the lack of resources like the labels in English is a big thing. When pulling data from my job, I found that there were, from January to December, there were a total of 1,556 recertification courses, and only 111 of them were in Spanish. So I think this is a big contributor as to why people feel insecure. They may be learning about the same things. They may be, don't have, maybe all the courses take place in Yakima and not the West Side. I think those are all big factors. So here are my recommendations. I think my coworkers are here on Zoom, so I think the three of us, we need to increase our outreach. I have some work to do on my end, increase outreach in Spanish and let them know, hey, you can develop educational content for your employees. I think as of January 1st, 2026, the EPA set out a mandate that all labels were supposed to be translated on products, but that is not found out in the field at this time. And I struggle to find current updated labels in Spanish as well, as an example. And so I think that although the EPA put out this mandate, registrants have fallen short and fallen behind. I think additional education and outreach on behalf of compliance agencies to ensure non-certified applicators are confident. So like we have a compliance agency within our program, translating their websites, creating flyers. I think that would all be really helpful. And putting out the word that employers can host more educational events. And I think someone can pick up on my research if they're interested. I think we need to look into why there are insecurities. Why are they stemming from? These are all just conclusions that I came to, but I think more interviews would be really helpful. And so just some acknowledgements, just thank you to everyone listed here. I'm really grateful to everyone's support and yeah, and putting up with me being frazzled. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have to take some questions.